Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Watson Michael from Ceylon Institute of English and Leadership. And this time, I got an interesting guest with me, all the way from the US. He was a prior police officer, marine, diplomatic security guard, or security official. He was actually he was a bodyguard to the ambassador, in other words, and army ranger as well prior. Okay, so currently he's a podcaster, and it's from the school to embassy. Right. Seth, welcome. And how are you doing today?
Thank you. Hey, I'm great. It's actually 9 o'clock at night over here for me, so it's been a full long day and I've still got stuff to do for a couple more hours. So it's always busy here.
All right, so you can pump some energy. See, Seth, I'm
Absolutely.
working late in the night. All
Uh,
right.
yep.
Cool, cool. Richard Worms, I know you'll be watching this, we want to say thank you and
Hey,
thanks for bringing Seth, right?
yep.
Don't complain later. And I hope you tried the chicken kottu, okay? The Sri Lankan delicacy, right?
Thank you, Rich. I really appreciate this. Sure.
Great. So, Seth, you come from a different background and you've been through so many things. What
Mhm.
has rejection taught you?
Well, I would say drawing on a lot of rejection in my life. I can tell you that it means a lot of different things depending on the type of rejection that you're getting, right? So, if you're getting rejection when you're leading a small team in special ops, it's probably because you've either done something that you shouldn't have or you didn't do something that you should have, and it's on you. You better figure out real fast what it was and get that corrected, right?
Mm.
Whereas if it's your wife, then you forgot what her birthday was or which today is your anniversary. You better figure that out pretty fast too. Rejection when it's the opposite sex, it's you've got something on your face or it's wrong timing. Like there's rejection all through your life, and you have to look at yourself. If you notice the one theme there, it's always looking back at yourself and figuring out what it was that brought about this rejection. It might not be something that you've done terribly wrong, but it's something that you need to correct and starts with self reflection, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So don't forget your wife's birthday.
Birthday or anniversary for sure.
Anniversary, right?
But
So
but with that, I wanted to lead into the to specifically business, and this is something that I'm really going through right now because my podcast topic, I'm trying to draw on all the background that I have of carrying a gun and protecting people, right? And that's what my job has been. And I became a new father, and that's the reason why I decided to start a podcast where I already knew guys had invented things that nobody knew about because the
mm,
marketing just wasn't there, and somebody needed to share how to protect schools from these school shooters. And that's the reason why I went into that. And right now I'm kind of at a point where people don't want to have me on their podcast because even the topic of what I talk about is something that they don't want associated with their brand. And so it made me take a step back and go, okay, well, is it something I'm doing wrong? Or like one of my guests, am I just not have I not done it long enough? One of them, she's been fighting human trafficking for 40 years. Everyone now today considers her the grandmother of fighting human trafficking, but she did that for, 35, 36 years in the dark. Nobody knew who she was, nobody cared. And then all of a sudden, oh, now all the work you've been doing for decades matter, right? So the big thing there with rejection in business especially is either you're hitting a brick wall and that means you should stop and go a different route, or you're hitting a brick wall, which means you need to go find a bigger hammer. And it's up to you to decide which that is, and if you're going to keep going to town on this wall, or you really need to readjust and go a different route.
Yeah. Interesting, right? So let me quickly recap on one thing when you said about don't forget your wife's birthday. I'm not sure if you watched Hawaii 5 the new one, right? So there was a particular episode. I'm a big fan of Hawaii 5 okay, that TV
Gotcha,
series,
gotcha. Yeah. Oh
which
yeah.
is always. I was watching one episode, and I think it was it on Valentine's Day or something, right? Happy Valentine's Day. That he was a police officer, okay? Danny, I think the character's name was, right? And he put Happy Valentine's Day and he forgot to put the word from, and below that it was Danny. So he got into trouble actually, right, for not putting the word from or sincerely or whatever, right?
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And that can trip you up too. Oh, that's funny.
True, true. So, yeah. So this guy, Ray Kroc, okay, I'm a big fan of Ray Kroc, okay. So the late Ray Kroc, right? So he started McDonald's at around 52, right? And we saw President Reagan joining politics late.
Hmm.
What are your views on starting a new chapter when everything is lost?
Yeah, when everything is lost, that's a great question. And really, I think about this because I just had this conversation with my mother. She actually is currently starting over kind of her life at the moment. I don't know if you know about the hurricanes that just hit us here in Tampa,
Mm.
uh,
I heard
but
about
about
it.
yeah, about 6 weeks ago, my family's house got covered. I mean, completely covered in water, and they were flooded out. They lost one mobile home that had my niece, who was 8 months pregnant, living in that, and now that's
Oh,
completely underwater and fallen apart. So and the sad thing is, like, my dad kind of abandoned my mom, and so she's going through a divorce, and worse than that, my dad took all the money and wasted it so that they have nothing from all the savings they had done their whole life. And so she's having to start over, and I
mm,
told her the same thing that I thought for myself when I recognized, and how I became a diplomatic security agent was, essentially I looked at, this isn't working. I'm going to have money in order to have IVF, in order to start a family. And I've
yeah.
just got to figure it out. And what I told my mom too is the same thing I told myself, which is, you know what? I can't change yesterday or anything that happened before it. But what I can change is today, what I'm going to do right now, and then what I'm going to do tomorrow and the day after that. And if I can change those things, that's all I need to focus on, because focusing in the rear view, and it's important to understand where you've been. It's important to work through those things. It doesn't mean that you can never just, not process the difficult things you've been through. But what it does mean is that if you just keep going and go and push yourself, and what will happen is eventually you're going to find yourself on the other side of that, and you'll look back. And this is how I've seen my whole life, having gone through the
Mm,
Marines and going through the Rangers and all the selection processes that weed out the percentage after percentage of man who quits or fails or quits, and then eventually you end up being the 1% of the 1%, and you look around and go, these are the people that, these are my brothers. These are the guys that I want to be around. And today, I'm working with one of my brothers that I served with. And when I pick up the phone to call my other brother I haven't talked to in months, it's like we never it's like we hadn't stopped talking our conversation, even if it's been several months or even a couple of years. Like, those types of people are the people you surround yourself with when you reinvent yourself, when you keep pushing, when you do that. Again, kind of like I was telling you before with a friend who, he just started doing what he was going to do, and he just
mm,
kept going until eventually nobody was around him anymore. Everybody had all quit. and he's the only one left, and therefore he is successful today just because he didn't quit. He didn't do any amazing things, and that's from him telling me himself. I'm not overly smart. I'm not the best, the brightest, the most beautiful. I just keep
Mm.
going, and that's from
Yeah.
somebody who's in their 60s and 70s, and they're still trying out different things and never settling and just letting it go. That's I know there's a lot of quotes out there. You don't become old until you decide that you are, until
Mm.
you decide that you're retired and you check that box and you go, okay, I guess I'm just supposed to go fishing. I'm never going to
Mm.
go fishing. I'm always going to be doing something. I'm going to be working to change the world, to change my family, to, better my legacy. Because if I do that, I'm still doing something worthwhile, and I'm doing something that hopefully my kids will be able to look up to again
True.
until the day I die.
True. The best anti-aging medicine is lifelong learning,
Mhm.
and and I appreciate one good thing you're doing. You're still in touch with your mother. Okay, so that's something great. Okay, I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'm taking care of it. This is actually the room that she stays in when she stays with us. So yeah, this is mom's room. She has to put up with all of my books and military memoirs and all my military stuff. But yeah, it's this is where she stays.
All right. Great. That's fantastic. Okay. So you're writing a new book,
Mhm.
right? Can you briefly tell us about it?
So I'm writing the first book, and this book, this is how I wrote a book because I can't sit still and just sit and type. It would drive me
Yeah.
nuts. So what I did is every morning, whenever I work out 5, 6 days a week, I always have, and I never took a day off when I left special ops. I just continued doing what I've always done. And I decided to write a book. That's when my cell phone, had the ability to use talk to text. And I was like,
Hmm.
okay. So I hit talk to text, and when I went for my 3 mile run before I worked out at the gym, I just talked to myself. So I just ran down the road talking to myself. I didn't pay any attention to how much I wrote, to if it was correct. I just kept going. And after many, many months of doing that, I finally pulled it all over into a software that will count it all for you and kind of prepare it and put it in a book format. And it ended up being 650 pages. And obviously, that's not, there's going to be a lot of errors in there and a lot of things that
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
fixed, but it's my story, and it's just my time, only my time. From at the moment that it starts is when I was currently in the Marines, but I was in the reserves and I was working as an EMT full time, more than full time, and getting my paramedic license so I could become a firefighter. That was the path my life was always meant to take. And then September 11th, 2001 happened, and the Twin Towers went down.
Yeah.
And when that happened, my entire life changed, and everything
Hmm.
that's happened to me since then has come from that moment. And that's where the book starts, is that moment when that starts, and then how I went from Marine going to be a firefighter to I have to give everything up and go join the war, and I want to be special ops, and I want to be behind enemy lines, and I want to go do all the cool things that you think of, in your mind as a little kid watching Rambo and watching all these movies. But with the realization, once you've been in where hard men are and you become one of those, in most people's estimation, right? Throwing on a huge heavy ruck and going for many miles up and down mountains, with Marines, it changed who I was, but it changed my perspective of who I could be. At that point, I wasn't special ops, and I didn't know 1000% that I could be, but I knew that I had nothing to lose, and I knew that I had my family. They would always be there, and I was willing to die for it. So I was going to go until they made me not go anymore. And I knew that that's the only thing I did know back then, right? There wasn't all these movies and books and everything written back in 2001. There wasn't Google to look any of this up. There wasn't, any of the Wikipedia you could all get on and look up all these things about how to be special ops. There was nothing. I literally just started working out on my own 6 hours a day, and I did insane workouts. And I started out with a 10-mile run as my warm up, and then I worked out for another 5 hours, including an hour or 45 minutes of treading water and just doing things that were uncomfortable to me. And by doing all those things, I eventually ended up, um, you know, be, putting myself into the position to where I, became what my kind of path had led me to be. And I think I'm getting off of the topic. I apologize. Give me give me the question again. What was my focus on this part of the question? Because it's also overlapping in my brain.
Yeah. So we asked about your book. Okay. So
Yes, and
what are
so that was it. Just those 3 years. I was a part of history. I was a part of the Jessica Lynch rescue mission. I got to be there, and there's a whole lot of stories that came out of what really happened that night. I was there. Like I got to see Saddam, uh, face to face. Like we didn't have some magical moment, but when they Delta and our guys grabbed him, they brought him to us at the Air Force or at the Air Force at the air base where we were stationed, the Special Operations compound, and they brought him to our little holding area, and that's where we held him. Well, immediately everybody knew where he was because literally Fox News came online the next morning, and they had some retired general get on there with a map of Baghdad, and was like, "If I were the military, this is where I would put Saddam," and pointed his finger at the building he was literally in. And I'm like, "Are you That's this guy's trying to get us killed. You're a military general. Why would you do that to us?" So immediately, all these bomb threats and all these guys that were going to bring, explosives to come kill us and then rescue Saddam was right there. I mean, we're right in the middle of the Baghdad airport, BIOP, and that all that was weird times to have lived through. And again, I want my kids to know about that, and I hope somebody can learn from it. My book won't tell you anything about some amazing war hero, because that's not me. I was just
Mhm.
a dude who volunteered and wouldn't quit, and that's it. Like, I have a master's degree, and it's not because I'm smart. It's because I kept doing my homework until there wasn't homework left, and that's it. I did that for 7 years. If you just put your mind to doing something, and you want to be a doctor, you can be a doctor. You don't have to be the smartest person on the planet to be one. You just start doing the coursework, and when they are done with all of the assignments to give you, now you're a doctor. Like that's what I've learned from so many talented and very smart people, is the same lesson over and over. It doesn't come through some amazing thing that you did and becoming an author, right? I'm
Yeah.
not the most well spoken. I'm not the most beautiful. I certainly don't have, a whole lot of money to throw behind. But it doesn't, a book or marketing or any of that. I'm just telling my story, and again, hopefully, my family, my kids, my legacy can learn from that.
Yeah. So yeah. Now you were yeah. So now your life has changed a lot. Okay, after becoming a father. Can you
Yep.
elaborate more on that?
At 43 years old, I finally became a dad. And here's the crazy part. I didn't tell you this part yet. So we did IVF. We had to do IVF, and it was me. I'm older than my wife. I'm 8 years older than my wife. She's also a combat veteran Marine. When she almost died in Marine boot camp, they literally had to pull her out of training because she had pneumonia, walking pneumonia, and she couldn't breathe. And she hadn't been able to breathe for like 11 weeks. And
Mm.
she kept passing out, and her teammates would catch her and wake her up, and then she would keep walking. So that's the woman that I decided to marry. And so naturally, finding my other half, we thought that there might have been she had some medical issues from going through
Mm.
training and a lot of that. It turns out it wasn't her, it is me. once that happened, once I got that realization, I looked around at where I was, and I'm, at the time making $45,000. We have a bunch of credit card debt. We're good with money. We're both come from dirt poor, but we had to spend a lot of money to move to Tampa, Florida, and uproot our families, and and also debt from my master's degree because I just finished that to move down here. So we're looking at all this debt. We're looking how could we possibly afford this insanely expensive IVF process. And I just fell back on what I knew, which was I had served in special ops. I was still in shape that I can do well against 18-year-old to 25-year-old males. I'll put it that way. So I had never been out of shape, and I wasn't ever going to get out of shape. So I reached out to some guys that I had served with in special operations and asked about contracting work, and they put me in touch with a guy. He saw my resume and was like, absolutely, but also, would you like to be a recruiter and recruit your own team before you go over? And I was like, wait, are you serious? And he's like, yeah, that's what we're doing. Would you like to do that? And I was like, yes, I would. He's like, and I was like, well, do I have to move? He's like, nope, we need somebody in Tampa, Florida. So here's your job. You work remotely from your house. You pick your own team. You go recruit from anywhere you want. You let me know where, I'll pay the bill, and we will get the best guys in here. And that's what I did for almost 2 years. I flew around the United States and went and recruited from special forces, from the Rangers, from all my buddies, right? From all the units that I had worked with, and ended up recruiting a bunch of really good dudes. And then I went through training and went and met them over in Iraq. And so it was phenomenal. But looking at that at 40 years old, up to that point, I had tried drinking coffee twice. Like I never had caffeine because I had just always had energy. And and then I go through all of the training there, and I'm good, and I smoked everybody on the run because that was my thing. I was always a fast runner when I was in special ops, and and I get through all that training, and it kind of again was one of those moments where I'm old, so I kind of reproved it to myself that I belong, that I could still hack it at going to the most dangerous place on the planet for an American at that moment is Kabul, Afghanistan, or Baghdad, Iraq, and I got assigned to Iraq, and at that time, of course, nothing was crazy at the moment until I arrived, and then I arrived at Baghdad, and 10 days later, they burned our gates to the ground and stormed over the walls and came to, kill us. And I got to live through that. Yes, I know I'll have to write a book later and tell all my experiences of living through that. But what's crazy is right the embassy attack or the attacks that happened years earlier on an American embassy and compound and CIA, the different contractors there that we all kind of know about now. You never know. That's the crazy thing about living through that type of life, right? Is that you never know what's going to happen. And I'm trying to become a dad, and I'm doing that, and I'm literally talking to my. I left my cell phone in the building, so I'm the morning after I get to finally make a phone call to my wife, and I'm like, hey, I'm alive. And she's, of course, upset because everybody in the family, everybody in our church family reached out to her and like, hey, here's pictures of the Baghdad embassy on fire. I hope Seth's okay. And she's like, I haven't heard from him. I keep calling. I can't hear. I haven't heard back from him. So I go from that to skip forward. I've got the money now. I've survived. I've been moved up. I'm actually on the ambassador's detail now, and I'm working doing the work that I wanted to do. I wanted to drive in the ambassador's detail. I wanted to be the fast driver out there, literally protecting the guy that's the target. And I take that money. We pay off all of our debt, except for our home, and we spend that money on IVF. My son was born on July 3rd, which for Americans, July 4th is a pretty big deal, especially for
Yeah.
two former Marines. and he's born the day before the birth of our country, and he is an amazing little baby, and it completely changed my life. I would say in the way that the day before I had become a Marine and the day after were two completely different halves of a life, right? Previous to that, I was an obese kid. I wasn't exactly attractive. I was dirt poor, so I always wore clothes from garage sales. I looked goofy. We could only afford two haircuts a year, so I always had messy hair. And I went from coming from that background to being a United States Marine, which was, now I'm extremely disciplined. I'm extremely focused. I'm working out 3 times a
Yeah.
day, and that move over to fatherhood. I come from all these things, and then the day that my son is born, now those things fade, and now the most important thing that I'm ever going to have done in my life starts on this day, July 3rd. And going forward, everything that I'm going to do, including writing a book about my life. If I wanted to write a book about my life and about my time in special ops, 20 years ago would have been a really good time for that. Right
Mhm.
now, I'm much older, and it's way less sexy than it was during the war to talk about those things. The whole point is it's not about me. It's about legacy. It's about my son. I'm writing a book to help him. And if it helps other men out there all over the world, that's phenomenal. I would love that. But my level of success is to help my son. And I think that it's that change in your priority to where all the things that you thought you cared about before, fancy car, cool motorcycle, whatever, second house up in the mountains, all those things fade. It's
Mhm.
what can I do to make this little boy into a good man who will eventually be a great father. And that's my
Mm.
goal. I want to raise a great father.
Very good. Yeah, so it's always important how you bring up your kids, right? So, what now they say there's a saying, the family you create is the most important. Can you briefly tell about that?
I would say, you know, my family tree, that's a whole nother book right there. I come
Yeah.
from drug addicts, alcoholics, and generally people that are on the fringes of, they want nothing to do with goals, with life, with anything. They just want to numb life and numb pain and just kind of exist. And that's what I was raised around. And so from that to, I leave home, I leave all these people who don't really necessarily have things going on in their life or have goals to do things. And once I had, earned the title Marine, and then I go into the Marine, I do these things, then I have now kind of put myself into a position where it changed me. But like I said before, in previous conversations that we've had, once you become the 1% of the 1%, and again, not by being special, but simply by refusing to quit, what you find yourself surrounded with is those same types of people. And that is the family that I have. My family is not the people that share my blood type. They're not the people that can give me a kidney per se, but they're the people that would scour the earth to find the kidney for me, if that makes sense. Like, my brothers are the people that I want to spend time with. If I have the option of going home to Oklahoma and spending time with people from my family tree, or with the brothers rich, with brothers that I've met here, that I've made connections with through podcasting, through just the connections that we did here. Me and Rich actually through actually previous to that was recruiting, when I was recruiting for bodyguards to go to Iraq, is where I first met Rich, actually at SOCOM, at Special Operations Compound. He was recruiting, helping recruit there. That's where I met him. I asked him for a connection for a plug-in. It started a conversation. Now look where we are. I'm on a
Mm.
podcast with you
Yeah.
because I made a new brother, and so you're choosing your family, and everybody can. The hard thing I would say for people that aren't right, you're not in that, not necessarily in special operations. Okay, cool, but here's the thing: if you do what other people don't want to do, if you do what's hard and nobody else wants to do, and you actually live that way, what you'll eventually find is you're going to meet people all along the way that you would have never met before, and they would have never been interested in knowing you, but because you are becoming who you are now, changing, improving, bettering yourself, now you're going to be in a different circle of people. You're not going to get along with all of them, and not all of them are going to want to get along with you. There's a lot of A-type personalities that are, ego driven and all those things. You're going to run into a lot of that. Don't lose heart. There's still really, really good people that you're going to meet along that way. And that's why I think the same thing with podcasting, right? With meeting you, with meeting people in another circle that I would have never been engaged with before. I'm going to find lifelong others through that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So from where you came, from where you came from drug addicts to alcoholics, you have had, I guess, a lot of trauma and you have been through hard times. But now the family you
Yeah.
create, you want it
Right.
to be different. I understand. So it
Yeah.
differs from people to people, but from where you came, from where you're making a change, and how you want your son to be a good man
Hmm.
and you to be different from you as well.
Yep.
So you want,
Absolutely.
yeah. So yeah, great.
Yeah.
So Seth, now we come to the final part. Okay, any
Hmm.
message you want to give?
So the message that I want to give, I think I typically tend to kind of cover, the motivational side, which is the
Hmm.
same thing that I think about this all the time to talk to my son about, is just, him deciding what it is that he wants to do. He doesn't need to be a Marine. He doesn't need to be special ops. Certainly doesn't need to be a
Correct.
police officer or go to Baghdad, right? Whatever it is that he decides to do. And my wife and I talk about this all the time because people always ask, especially with our background. They're like, oh, well, he's going to be a Marine. And we're like, if he wants to be, he will. Now, granted, we're going to raise him with discipline, with self discipline. We're going to instill self discipline. And I think that the one message I would leave with everybody is what I hope to leave with them with my book, which is, if you are the one who pushes yourself, you're not ever going to get pushed anywhere you don't belong or you don't want to go, right? And in reality, if it's you that's pushing you every day, even if you don't know exactly where you're going. Every day that I worked out, I didn't know I was going back to Iraq. I
Hmm.
never thought in a million years I was actually going to go back to Iraq. But what I knew is that what got me this far in life was this habit that I had created. And if I kept that habit up, it was going to keep me where I was, and or it was going to keep me around the same types of people that I had been engaged with,
Hmm.
all along, that had worked in my life. So it's that self-discipline, I think, is the thing that most people don't really talk as much about. They are all looking to be a great leader, and they're all looking to find a great leader in business. But what they're not looking toward is the first step, which is a great leader starts by self discipline. Because without self
Hmm.
discipline, who's going to be pushing you? Who's going to keep you
Yeah.
consistent? Who's going to
Yeah.
make you better yourself so that other people will want to follow you? Only you can do that.
Absolutely. So, Seth, thank you very much
Thank
for
you, brother.
taking time
For
and
sure.
doing the podcast with us.
Absolutely. I appreciate you bringing me on.